Hello and welcome to Eagles East. Without further ado, let's check on the votes for the schemes of manoeuvre. It was quite a close one this, but ultimately option 3 won through. And as a reminder, that was a general advance north by all divisions, including the 13th, who were going to leave a brigade behind in stock. So obviously General de la Lanterne Rouge's division is now split. And this is how the Corps has advanced up until the 23rd of December. You can see that there was fair weather, but then the heavy rain returned. Why have I stopped on the 23rd of December? Well, unbeknownst to the French, the Russian 17th Division has been based in Nowe Wykno the whole time, and the 21st Division have now run into them. I've rolled the encounter dice, and the French have got a bold commander, so he is definitely not going to back down. And the Russian commander, although he's a commissariat, knows he has a good defensive position, so will stand and fight. It's the Battle of Nowe Wykno. General Marcel Cul-de-Sac's division looks like this. I haven't done any attrition because we're part way through this week, so that is effectively the same state as at the last update. Stand fast, another 100 troops garrisoning Smelechi. And facing them, General Otto Mann's division, 5 brigades and some artillery. Half of the infantry is fairly decent quality, but brigades 3 and 4 are a bit ropey. Okie dokie, let's check out the ground that the two divisions are going to be fighting over. Well, the dominating feature is the River Narev, which runs north-south on the left-hand side or western side of the battlefield, and cutting the battlefield in half is a large tributary coming from the marshland on the east. The town of Nowe Wykno is to the north of the tributary and the village of Smelechi to the south. There is one stone bridge which crosses over the tributary. It is of good repair, but the remainder of that watercourse is impassable due to the heavy rains. General Cul-de-Sac and his command are sat in Smelechi. His brigade set out before him, grenadiers to the fore, and the veteran brigades on the left and on the right. He's also got his dragoons in reserve, but I don't think they'll be playing much part in this battle. The problem being, he has got to get across that bridge, and that's the only way across, and assault the larger number of Russian forces. General Otto Mann for the Russians. He's up on this little bit of high ground. There isn't much around, but it does afford him the visibility of the French advance up to Nowe Wykno. He's decided to stand and fight. He knows it's a good defensive position, and he knows the French are going to struggle to get across that bridge. And to make it even harder for the French, it is still raining heavily. So we start with ADC availability. 5 for the French and just 2 for the Russians. Well, it's no great surprise that the French would be doing a brigade reroll and a forwards tasking for the grenadiers. Cul-de-Sac will also have a scouts, and the brigade on the left have a reroll. For the Russians, it's just 1 brigade reroll for the Jaegers to the front and the musketeers on the right as we look. From an orders perspective, I'm afraid the French have 2 hesitant brigades. The cavalry to the rear, well, they're not going anywhere anyway, and this brigade on the right. The grenadiers and the brigade on the left are okay. The Russians are all good to go, apart from the brigade back left as we look. Initiative with extra dice. Now the French are fortunate because of that scouts, they can re-roll that one. And they get the rub of the green there and will go first. Lucky. So it's a general advance for the grenadiers with a forwards tasking. 2d6 plus 6, so that's 14. Halved, 7, plus their 4.5, which is their half movement. 2 brigade will nudge up. And all the Russians are going to do is just push forward this skirmish screen. End of turn. ADC availability. 5 for the Russians and a reroll with the French, so just a 3 for them. Well, there's not a lot Cul-de-Sac can do apart from a reroll and a forwards tasking for the grenadiers. The Russians, on the other hand, is brigade rerolls for the front 3 brigades and artillery assault for those 9-pounders. Hesitant brigade for the French on the right again, and also for the Russians back left again. So it's an extra dice for initiative. So that does actually go to the Russians. No charges, no tactical movement at the moment. So we'll get the Grenadiers on the move again. So that's 7 plus 6 is 13, plus 9 is 22, halved is 11. And the gun will move over here. And this brigade will start to come behind. So we're into firing, and the Russian skirmishers will open fire first across the river. They're just in range, and it's 4 dice. That's 4 hits, 2 casualties. Voltigeurs will fire back with 6 dice. 3 hits, 1 casualty. And the Russian gun is just in range of the front rank of the Grenadiers and will open fire. I'm giving inferior fire because of the horrific weather conditions, but apart from that, it's 4 casualty dice extra. So that's 4 casualties and a discipline test. Grenadiers are elite. 6 is no problem. End of turn. ADC availability. One reroll for the French. So they'll have 4 and the Russians 3. So it's all happening in the centre, which obviously this battle is all about. The Grenadiers have a forwards tasking, no reroll, and an artillery assault, whereas the Russians will again go for the artillery assault with a brigade reroll. 3rd Brigade for the French don't like it. They're hesitant again, but more importantly, even with a reroll, the Russian Jaegers here are hesitant. Not good. Initiative. Definitely with the French there. So first of all, they will unlimber. Forwards tasking for the Grenadiers. 7, 13, 22, 11. Like so, I think. No movement from the Russians, so we're into skirmish firing. And I think the majority can see the battery there rather than those skirmishers on their right, so they're going to target the artillery. So that's 5 hits, 2 casualties. Russian skirmishers will fire at the French. 3 hits, 1 casualty. French battery here will open fire artillery assault. It is canister range. 3 casualties and a discipline test. Jaegers are veterans. 4. Unformed. And finally the Russian guns, artillery assault also, but they're part of a hesitant brigade, which doesn't have an effect actually, so it's going to be canister range on these Grenadiers. Could be nasty. 2 casualties. I think the Grenadiers got away with that. That's the end of turn. So things are looking a bit dicey for the French at the moment. That front Grenadier battalion is worn with those 6 casualties, so they've got to be careful, but there's no other way around it. They've got to go for it. And we're into ADC availability. 4 for the French with a reroll. 5, 3. So General Cul-de-sac is in for post of honour. They've got forwards and glory if they get into combat. Meanwhile, the Russians have a brigade reroll and artillery assault. Can they use it? French desperately need the initiative here. The Russians have 1 hesitant brigade. And they have it. It will be a charge. So this battalion here, they are worn. These guys will probably be able to support. I'm just working out which way to go. They've got 3 casualties already. They haven't, so I think it's probably left, even though it obscures the guns from firing. I think they've got to do it. So it's forwards tasking first. 9 plus 6 is 15, plus 9 is 26, halved 13, that's it, that's enough. Now, I think they recover 1 casualty. I'm not quite sure whether that's for the charge or the combat, but I'm doing it now, which means they're sub 6. I might be being generous to the French there, but that's the way I'm playing it. So before we get to the actual charge, the Jaegers here will fire. They are veterans and in line. They're also large, so they get 2 extra casualty dice. Well, a double 1 is losing fire discipline, but they do get 2 casualties. So I make that the Russians have 2 dice and the French have 3 because of those casualties. However, the French do get a reroll because that's supporting battalion. So 8-6 at the moment to the French, but they will re-roll that too. 9-6. That's a win by 3. The French will take the ground and the Russians retreat. First of all, 4 casualty dice casualties. Just the 1. So that goes up to 4. And they will go back into the village. And the French take the ground. And that, I think, is the end of the charge. 2nd Brigade will move. As will the 3rd, finally. And the cavalry. Well, for the Russians, unfortunately, that lot were hesitant, but the skirmishers can still play a part. I think I can reconfigure the French skirmishers here. Let's see why not. They're pretty fluid chaps. And this battalion here will wheel around to their right. Alright, French skirmish line here will fire against the Jaegers. 2 hits, 1 casualty. Jaegers will fire back. 3 hits, 1 casualty. And the Jaegers here will fire into this battalion. 2 hits, 1 casualty. Now we're on to artillery. Well, as I said earlier, the French battery in the foreground here is not got a target now, unfortunately. However, those Russians do, and it's artillery assault, and they're going to be smashing that rear battalion of the Grenadiers. 5 extra casualty dice. But that's a poor roll. It's actually just 1 casualty. That is piss poor. So no combat. That is the end of turn. Looking south from the Russian position, Grenadiers are across the bridge. They've taken a lot of casualties, but they've pushed the Jaegers back. They now need some support from the other brigades, but they're a little bit far behind. Can the Grenadiers hold on? Can the Russians hold on? Quick clarification before I continue. The French skirmishers in the middle ground there, they had 4 casualties. Of course, the base goes after 3, so I've adjusted that, taken the base away. They're now on 1. And these Russians here had loss of fire discipline but retreated. So I'm not quite sure whether they keep the smoke there for loss of fire discipline. I'll do so at the moment. ADC availability. 6 for the French, that is extremely useful, and 5 for the Russians. So again, massive effort by the French for the Grenadiers. Forwards tasking, they want to try and chase after those Jaegers who retreated. Brigade reroll and skirmish tasking there, so that's a hefty 4 ADCs. And a forwards tasking for this brigade to the rear. They need to get up there, 2nd Brigade. For the Russians, the Jaegers have a brigade reroll, artillery assault, and the musketeers over here also a brigade reroll. All French brigades are compliant with orders. En avant. The Russian Jaegers who retreated, they're now unformed, but they have a hesitant brigade at the back. They don't like it, they're just stuck there, being a bit silly. Initiative. Well, that's 5 each. Lucky for the French, it goes to them. Right, first of all, charges. This lot are going to go into them. 6 plus 6 is 12, plus 9, 21, halved. That's enough to get in. All right, let's get the matey out of the way. So the Jaegers will fire. They're unformed and have lost their fire discipline, so it's 1 casualty dice only. No effect. And for the actual charge itself, it's 3 dice for the French because they've got 7 casualties, and 3 dice for the Russians because they're unformed. 1 reroll for the French because they're elite, and 2nd reroll because they're supported. And that's a disaster for the Russians, but I think the French might push it. They've got 2 rerolls, and they'll reroll that one. And again. 9-3. Win by 6. Victory. So first of all, Jaegers have got to retreat again and take 6 casualty dice. And that's another 4. So they go to 8. Back they go. The French will take the ground. And they can also recover a casualty. And I think that's the end of that. Tactical movement. Right, let's get this lot moving. 9 plus 6 is 15, plus 9 is 24. 12. Our 3rd Brigade of the Cavalry move up. All the Russians here, I think they will wheel to their right. They will change formation. I think the gun has to wheel. And this brigade here will start to move. Over to the skirmish battle. Both have skirmisher tasking, but it's the French first with 7 dice. 5 hits, 2 casualties, and the double 6 causes a discipline test. So the Russians lose a base. So these are the Minsk Musketeers. They are line. And I'm afraid those skirmishers are unformed. Well, I think they get another casualty. So the Russians will fire back. I think because of the skirmish tasking, they're lucky and get 4 dice. But that's just 1 hit and no effect. Over to the skirmish by the bridge. French will open fire first. 2 hits, 1 casualty. And the Russians will fire back. 1 hit, no casualties. The Russian guns are firing virtually point blank at this Grenadier battalion here. But unfortunately, because they wheeled, they've lost a lot of their casualty dice. So it's just 2 dice on inferior fire and 1 casualty dice. And that's 1 casualty and a discipline test. Well, the French are elite. So that's no problem. En avant. And finally, some musketry from these chaps here firing up the column. 5, and that is 1 casualty. And that is the end of turn. ADC availability. 1 reroll for the French. So that's 3 each. Neither side able to do too much there. The French brigade coming over the bridge as a reroll, as do the Grenadiers with a skirmish tasking, and the Russians there with the Jaegers, a brigade reroll and a artillery assault. 3rd Brigade for the French are hesitant. Everybody else is good to go. Those Jaegers who retreated are now unformed. Initiative. Well, the French just sneak that. Lucky. They will declare 1 charge. These Grenadiers are going to right wheel and go for the guns. It's risky, but there's no other alternative, I don't think. So, away we go. Well, I'm thinking because it's artillery assault, they'll be able to do that as the charge comes in. 3 casualties only, but that takes them up to 6. So the French will have 3 dice and the artillery 2. The French will get 2 rerolls, 1 for being elite and 1 for being a better troop grade because the artillery are line. So that's 5 all at the moment. First reroll for the French. Ooh, look at that. 9-5. So that is a win by 4 at the moment, which will mean take the ground and the defender has to retreat. I don't think it's worth rolling that 3 again. 4 casualty dice on the artillery. They take 1. However, artillery batteries retreating from either a charge or combat, and it was a charge, are dispersed and removed from play. Away they go. And the French take the ground, which means they recover a casualty. So on the tactical movement front, this battalion is going to go into line. This battalion comes across the bridge. They are hesitant, but the cavalry will move up. For the Russians, they will move to their side there and they will advance. They will move up. They will move backwards slightly. Skirmishers move over here. The skirmishers probably stay there with them. And 3rd Brigade, the Kursk Musketeers, will start to move over as well. They will reform. And I think that means they're back under fire control, fire discipline. And this lot will move forward. So the Grenadiers doing a good job at the moment, but they have taken a lot of casualties. They are desperately waiting for the 2nd Brigade to get over that bridge and move off to their right. Meanwhile, all the Russians are converging. Right, skirmish tasking on the French left flank. 7 dice. 4 hits, 2 kills. Now that's another base gone for the Russians, and that means they disperse. Haven't even got to worry about the discipline test with those 2 6s. Gone. And over by the bridge, the French have 5 dice here. Well, that's 3 hits. Double 6, but that doesn't do anything because there's no skirmish tasking. So there's 1 kill, which means another base has gone there. Russians will fire back with 3 dice. Ugh. And that is a very poor, no hits. Well, there's no guns available to fire at the moment, so we're straight into musketry. The French Grenadiers will open fire on the Minsk Musketeers. 3 extra casualty dice, but it's an inferior volley. So that is 3 casualties. Russians will fire back. 2 dice. 1 casualty. And this battalion will fire. Also 2 dice. I'm afraid they've lost their fire discipline. No effect. And over here, the Jaegers, what's left of them, will fire at these Grenadiers. 3 extra casualty dice. 5 casualties. Big hit. That's the end of turn. ADC availability. 6 for the French and a disastrous 1 for the Russians. Old Cul-de-sac is up for it. It's his 2nd and final sync command. It's a forwards and glory tasking for the 2nd Brigade. Get across that bridge and go and assault those Jaegers. Skirmish tasking on the left and the brigade back right. Activating, and I want this artillery to get up to the river and start pounding the Russians across there. And that brigade for the Russians is the only reroll they have. Well, unfortunately for the French, they have 2 hesitant brigades. The cavalry at the rear, they're just obviously waiting their turn to get over the bridge. And the Grenadiers, obviously taking a few casualties, they don't like it. But also, just to their front, the Minsk Musketeers for the Russians have gone hesitant. Let's do initiative. Extra dice for everybody. Well, can you believe that? Dreadful roll for both sides, but they're even, so the French get it. And that means we're in for a charge by this battalion against the Jaegers over there. 8 plus 6 is 14. Plus 9 is 23. Cogs are whirring. I think it's 11.5. Do you know what? I think that's just enough. It is. That's probably been a bit generous to the French, but there we are, never mind. Let's get these skirmishes out of the way. The Jaegers will fire as the French go in. 3 extra casualty dice, large battalion, veteran, and the French are attacking in column. 3 casualties and a discipline test. French are veteran, so they're okay with that, just. Well, this is a bit risky for the French. I think it's 2 dice each, no rerolls. Well, would you believe that? 12-7 to the French. So win by 5. Defender retreats and 4 casualty dice casualties. And the French will take the ground. So I think these chaps will go back here. Take 2 casualties. And the French move up here. Right, we're now into movement. So they can't move because they're hesitant, the Grenadiers. I think I can do formation change though. So this lot will probably go into line. They've charged, so they've got to stay there. The rest of the brigade will come up. And at the rear here, 3rd Brigade will also move over and they get the gun up the river. Kursk Musketeer Brigade, they'll just shuffle their skirmishers over here. This battalion will move up. And realistically, I'm going to get that gun over there as well. They can unlimber next turn. That's probably it for them. They are hesitant, so we can't do anything there. And the Jaegers can sort them out and get to unformed status. I think that is it for tactical movement. Right, another skirmish battle here. 5 dice for the French, and at the moment 5 for the Russians. 2 hits, 1 casualty. 4 hits, 2 casualties. And over here, French skirmisher tasking, 7 dice. Well, it's a very similar hit from before. Fantastic shooting there. 4 hits, 2 kills and a discipline test. The Mince Musketeers are line. 6 unformed. No artillery firing, so straight into musketry. The Grenadiers will keep going. 3 extra casualty dice, but it's an inferior volley. 2 casualties. You're up to 5. The Russians will fire back, but just 2 dice. 1 casualty. And the other battalion here will fire on the skirmishers. Weak volley, 1 casualty dice. 1 casualty. And that, I think, is end of turn, and it's back to ADC availability. One reroll for the French. So that's 4 all. Mass ADC action to the French 2nd Brigade. Forwards, Glory, Brigade reroll. They're going to try and charge the Kursk Musketeers, who have a reroll. They also have some skirmish tasking and a couple of other brigade rerolls at the rear there. All French units compliant. Unfortunately for the Russians, the Jaegers have gone hesitant there. So I'm thinking they remain unformed. Right, let's get on with initiative. Well, there we go, certainly with the French there. And the French will declare a charge here against the Kursk Musketeers. 11 plus 6 is 17. Plus 9, 26. 13, more than enough. Now, I didn't do it last time, I should have done. I think the skirmishers get 1 shot off before they disappear. So 5 dice, but 7 because it's skirmish tasking. I'm thinking that is allowed. But that's very poor. So 1 casualty on the infantry there as they go in. Skirmishers take a casualty. And I'll get them out of the way. Right, now the Musketeers will fire. 2 casualties. Are into the charge. 3 dice for the French with 2 rerolls because they're veteran and the higher quality than the recruits. 2 dice for the Russians. So that's 7 apiece, but there's 2 rerolls for the French. And I think I'll leave it at that. 10, 7, win by 3. Defender retreats and 4 casualty dice. 3 casualties. So they will go back over there. I think they will stay there, but they can recover a casualty. And that charge is over. Movement. Right, this gun will unlimber here. And this brigade will shuffle forward. I really want to sort out these battalions here by the Grenadiers, but they got themselves in a bit of a pickle. I think they'll just shuffle and they can't go very far that way. That's about it for them. I'm thinking for the French, the skirmishers can reform over here. The Russian gun will move themselves out of the way. And this skirmish line will come forward. They're hesitant, can't move. And that's probably about it. Skirmish firing on the French left. 3 hits, 1 casualty. Skirmish firing against the Russian skirmishers. 4 hits, 2 casualties. So that means we lose a base. Russians will fire back with 4. No effect. And I think the French can fire here. They've unlimbered. And now it's the guns finally back in action. I think these chaps, they're horse artillery actually, I forgot. They'll fire at the Russian gun. But I think it's just 1 casualty dice. And that's no effect. So a bit of musketry. This battalion of grenadiers will fire at them again. 2 extra casualty dice, inferior fire. 2 casualties. Russians will fire back. 2 dice, inferior volley. 2 casualties. All grenadiers looking dodgy. And finally this battalion firing at the skirmishers. Again, inferior fire. 3 casualties and a discipline test. Well, that's instantly a base gone. But they're okay. End of turn, ADC availability. So that's going to be 6 for the French and 3 for the Russians. So once again, 2nd Brigade, forwards tasking with the brigade reroll. The 3rd Brigade over the river is artillery assaulting with the horse artillery. And the Grenadiers are also a brigade reroll. For the Russians, it's 3 brigade rerolls. The chaps on the left here, Minsk Musketeers, the Jaegers, and also the Kursk Musketeers on the right as we look. And everybody is orders compliant, initiative. And that will go with the French. Again. So here we go. These chaps here are going to right wheel and smash into those musketeers. Oh, look at that cracking roll there. 12 plus 6 is 18, plus 9 is 27. More than enough to get in. Let's do some skirmish firing at them as they go. 2 hits. 1 casualty. Ooh. Takes them up to 6. Right, let's clear those skirmishers out of the way. Well, I guess the Russians can fire. There's no point in aligning per se, but they're in column. So it's 1 casualty dice only. No effect. 3 dice for the French, 2 for the Russians, but there's 2 rerolls for the French. They've got support and they're a grade higher than them. In fact, 2 grades higher. So 9, 5, let's win by 4 at the moment. I am going to gamble and do a reroll. Got 2 chances here. Oh, well, there we go. Can't get any better than that. I'm not going to reroll 5. So it's 11-5. Win by 6. Victory. 6 casualty dice on the Russians. Just 2. So they got away with that, I think. And they have to retreat. I think they'll just take the ground. And they recover a casualty. Right, now we're into movement. The remainder of the brigades will start moving across the bridge, eventually. And I should have done this before, but these grenadiers here are going to withdraw behind those others. They virtually had it. They do pick up a retreat marker, but there's no casualties. This line will move forward. These chaps will just sidle across so they can attack the other battalion. They can get their fire discipline under control. They can reform. They can reform. These Jaegers will come forward. And these artillery will try and get out of the way. We'll also just push these skirmishers up. Not quite sure if they can move, but they have done in the tactical movement phase. We're into skirmish firing and they're going to fire at the gun. 3 hits, 1 casualty. Russian skirmishers firing at this battalion. 2 hits, 1 casualty. Takes them up to 6. And French skirmishers here against this battalion. 3 hits, 1 casualty. Now horse artillery here, they did have to wheel, but they're on artillery assault, so let's work that one out. Yeah, just 1 casualty dice there because of that. But that's 1 casualty caused on the Russians and 1 fatigue casualty on themselves. no musketry. They're all just outside of range, particularly since those grenadiers just pull back there. So that is the end of turn. So General Otto Mann on his high ground overlooks the carnage through the heavy rain. This is a campaign, and he's thinking, well, we've given the French a bloody nose, but it's only going to go one way now. Recruits on the left, the Kursk musketeers, are getting pushed back by the French 2nd Brigade, and the Jaegers, they're rallying a little bit, but again, they're not doing particularly well. The Grenadiers for the French have taken a lot of casualties, but they've steadied themselves there. And again, the Minsk musketeers here are doing okay, and the remainder of the reserves for the Russians are recruits. So it's probably only going to go one way. The French are ready to put another brigade over the bridge and the cavalry to exploit. So, with the heavy rain as cover, the Russians will disengage. So the Battle of Nowe Wykno goes to the French, but it has been hard fought. As the famous German von Moltke allegedly said, no campaign rules plan survives contact with the enemy, or something like that. In other words, after this first battle, I've amended the way I'm going to calculate battle casualties. A dispersed unit will lose 2/3 of its total strength, or the unit type multiplied by the number of game casualties, whichever is greater. So, as an example, each infantry game casualty is 40 men, a cavalry game casualty is 30 men, and an artillery game casualty is half a gun, so 2 casualties will be 1 gun. However, for the infantry, I won't be including skirmisher casualties. In addition to all of that, all units will still lose 5% of the total strength, regardless of the actual casualties during the battle. So I've taken my shoes and socks off to get all the fingers and toes out from counting, and I think this is where we are. At the end of the battle, with the battle casualties and with the 5% attrition across the board, this is what the 21st Division looks like. Obviously, the Grenadiers took a hefty hit, but also 2nd Brigade there. The remainder of the division didn't fare too badly. And for the Russian 17th Division, most of their heavy casualties on the better troops, as you'd expect. They were at the front fighting off the French. However, they also lost a huge number of guns, with the 9-pounder foot battery being dispersed. Overall, a hard day at the office for General Otto Mann. Dispatches will be sent by both generals to their respective corps headquarters. The French will occupy Nowe Wykno and lick their wounds there, and the Russians will retreat north. The French Chief of Staff, Colonel Pierre Bière, will update the overall situation of the corps in due course.